I was working the gate the other night for a basketball game, and with my kids, I had kids who needed service hours. They were working the gate, and I was just supervising because there's money involved. And this guy rolls up. He's not from our town. Did not have a badge that I recognized, and he had a neighboring county tag on his car, and I didn't know him.
So you're going to ask for free admittance?
He didn't ask anything.
Yeah.
He rolled up without stop and held a badge up to the window in plain clothes and said, PD, and kept going. And this is criminal justice kids that are serving with me. And I was like, guys, I want to chase that guy down and just have a conversation with him, because in my opinion, he just hurt, in your minds, my profession, and I don't like that. I don't like it. I don't know how he gets treated in his town or what he expects because of that badge, but I do not like it. That is a root of other things, and I do not like it. I don't like it at all. I don't appreciate it, and I would love to tell him about it, but I'm not going to because it's $3 at the end of the day. It's not a big deal. But
kids have any response to that in that moment?
Yeah, they thought he was a jackass. Man, that's downright mindful.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
We just become best friends. Yep.
We don't make mistakes. We have happy accidents.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
I don't need backups. I'm going to Harvard.
Remember these words. If it doesn't fit, you must acquit.
Do or do not. There is no try.
I still have a dream.
Welcome to Downright Mindful, a meeting place where we explore meaning, seek connections, and examine the relationships between people, events, and the ideas that shape our world. Hosted by me, Matt Paris, my friend and colleague Paul Sawsville. Each episode will dive into thoughtful conversations that spark reflection and curiosity. Thanks for joining us. Now let's get right down to it. I had put into my Google search bar because I'd heard somebody talking about the idea of how old men Google things and they just type in a whole sentence, and that's me. I feel like I structure those sentences pretty well, but I just put in there, man, like education podcast. And because I was looking for are there some conferences around the country? Is anybody trying to integrate this kind of like we are? And we're just kind of scratching the surface. And that one popped up, and I sort of...
Where was it again?
Chicago.
Yeah.
It's in Chicago, and I clicked on it, and I read just for a minute or two maybe, but my mind was somewhere else all of a sudden, and I went somewhere else, did something else. But, I don't know.
Well, my favorite part of traveling to conferences is, number one, you just meet people that are already doing what you want to do. My favorite part.
Yeah.
And then inevitably you crash into people that you're already doing something that they want to do. And you get to be that same thing that you're hoping to crash into. Man, I love it.
Yeah.
So, and then when you get to go to places like Chicago, you get to have the event, but then you also get to have the city.
Yeah. Now, as the world traveler, I'm assuming you've been to Chicago?
I have.
Yeah. I've never been. The closest I got was, I went and picked up a prisoner in a place called South Haven, Michigan one time. And, by the way the crow flies, I wasn't too far from Chicago, and all the roads that we took as we got close to that place, because it's on the banks of Lake Michigan.
Yeah.
So
you're right there.
It's not far.
Yeah.
It's not far. That's the closest I've been. I could see highway signs for Chicago, and there were things in our probably MapQuest directions at the time that were helping us avoid certain roads. Like maybe I don't know if they were toll roads or what they are, but yeah, we live that life, man. We come in the morning and type in our directions on MapQuest, hit print, carry those things into the car. But
yeah, love Chicago. First time, buddy of mine from high school was getting married, had a Greek wedding.
Yeah.
We were breaking some dishes and everything. That was a lot of fun. With my buddy Chris Townsend, you know that name, firefighter here in town.
Man, I know the name. I don't know why.
His lovely bride is a judge.
Oh, there you go. That's why.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I know
go.
who you're talking about.
Yep.
Yep.
So he's had his hands in all kinds of stuff. He's always been that kind of, man, I'm going to figure this out. He was like that, when we were in college. But we went and, gosh, got some tickets on the street to a Cubs game, went to Wrigley Field, and then later on, Sarah and I did an anniversary trip where we went to a Cubs game, but also went and saw Hamilton live. That was a blast. And
Yeah.
just big city life, man. I love it.
You do?
Mm-hmm. I do.
I don't know enough to know. I don't. I have no experience to draw from. The only time I've ever been to big cities, I've been to Detroit, but I stayed in a hotel one night, woke up the next morning, checked out, went to the jail, and
These are not vacations.
picked up a prisoner. No, I mean the most I get out of it is I roll into town and I grab some biddles and stay above the saloon and then come down and pick up the prisoner and gallop them across the country to the. No, I'm just kidding.
Now, Detroit's a fun town. We got people just north of there in Warren and, just that downtown area. Tiger Stadium is amazing. But just when the Super Bowl, I don't even remember which one it was. I want to say 50 just for fun. They got ready for the world to come to their town again. And it really rejuvenated some things. So it's a neat place. Food, music, the culture, the vibe. Casinos downtown. Not that that's not my thing, but I got some buddies that is their thing.
I used to wonder, like, when I was patrolling the byways of Bradley County, I used to wonder, like, what, not only Chicago, but even, like, Chattanooga, how much different is the life of a police officer in, Chattanooga than it is for a young dude like me up in Bradley County? It's got to be quite a bit different. And then you draw a contrast to that and you get down around Atlanta, get into Chicago. I mean, it's a different life. I'd say there are some elements that would crosswalk with each other, bump into each other, but the day-to-day has to be completely different.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's true for some teachers too, isn't it? You've kind of lived two lives teaching, haven't you?
Well, my first semester teaching was down at Howard. It was certainly a different experience than teaching at Walker Valley.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, that's just a little drive down I-75. But I mean, you leave Walker Valley, and I mean, we're out in North Bradley County, but like teaching where we're at is certainly different than, McMinn Central.
Yeah.
Or keep going to, Philadelphia, Tennessee.
Yeah.
Right? You just you get off a little bit more and, so yeah, just a few miles make a huge difference.
Yeah, man. It's cool to think of. Hey, I want to talk to you about something today.
Okay.
And this will have, as many levels as we want to install. I think this is one of those conversations that we'll look at each other in an hour and we'll have only scratched the surface. And as usual in my conversations, I'm not looking for answers here. I'm looking for speculation. When I was a sheriff's deputy, we used to do continuing education every year, as do most professions, have some sort of in-service training that you complete throughout a year to maintain some sort of certification. It's that way in teaching. It's that way in hospitals. It's that way in pharmacies. It's that way at, police departments. And every year there would be some mixture of certain trainings that the training staff at that department thought was necessary or helpful. But there would always be these like mandatory ones. And I find this to be true in teaching as well, I think. One thing you're going to talk about at a police agency during those in-service trainings is bloodborne pathogens. Okay? You're in a profession where you are likely to encounter blood, so it's pretty smart to talk about, bloodborne pathogens, where they are, where they exist, how to use universal precaution to avoid, how to clean up a blood spill, what to do if you're exposed, all those things. And the other thing, maybe there were times where I found this to be like, oh my word, here we go again. But the older I get, the more I am sort of a nerd in this topic. And that was ethics. Just ethics. In my classroom, I call it police officer ethics because I'm trying to point them toward sort of a niche of that conversation, but it lives everywhere. We're husbands, we're dads, we're teachers, we're nerds, and ethics sort of comes into play in every one of those, those hats that we wear. But there was always this little, this line of questioning in the, from the perspective of a police officer. And there are certain questions that if I start asking them to you, if there's police officers listening to us, they will have heard some version of those questions before. Okay. And, the first place I heard them was in an interview to get a job at the sheriff's office. They would say some version of like, hey, if you're working on a shift and a partner of yours or some other deputy that you're working with, you notice them, they take some property. Maybe it's a watch. Some would say money. You see them put it in their pocket. What do you do? What are you going to do? How are you going to react to that? So that's
is
one.
That supposed to be a difficult question for someone to answer? Are we reading like how long they take to answer? Are we reading body language? Are we seeing like?
Well, they want to hear sort of a line of thought. You know what I mean? They want to see.
They want to hear more than just tell somebody. Say something to the
They
guy.
just want to hear something besides, it's none of my business.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I mean, they want
Yeah.
something besides just the obvious answer.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple options here. Okay, so some of the most popular options are like, I'm gonna ask that person, hey, what are you doing with that watch in your pocket, or that, hey, that money's in your pocket. What's up with that? Like, there's that school of thought, and then there's the, I'm not gonna say anything. I'm gonna go straight to my supervisor and say, hey, we were doing this, and that guy he put money in his pocket or whatever it is. There's a couple of those. And
Is this where I should talk about Denzel Washington and Ethan Hawke in Training Day?
yeah, go ahead.
Is this where we're going?
No.
Have you seen that movie?
I've seen it, but not like
Has it been a while?
I didn't nerd out on it.
No, well, no. I mean, it's just entertaining. But I mean, like he's setting him up all day long. Those who are familiar with it, and it's a great movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's entertaining, and that would be one of those along these lines that you're talking about of like, okay, in the real world, when this goes down right here,
Yeah.
like, could this really happen? Is there really these people that show up in restaurants who meet with cops and have these conversations, and like, and then there's Russian mobsters, and then like when the kid is training in your car, can you really have him like do this thing and go like how much of this is like, good storytelling, or how much of this is really like, oh my word, there's corrupt cops everywhere, there's politicians, there's mobsters,
Yeah, I would. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of layers to just what you just said. What I remember of that movie, they sort of take every little situation to the extreme, I would say. But yes, there's corrupt people everywhere. I do believe that is true. And there are, I've encountered myself, not just, well, I was working in the jail. This is long before I went to patrol. And there was this old guy on our shift, and he was a corrections officer. Everybody loved this guy. He was a bubbly personality. Like he's an old dude. He had one-liners for days, and he could tell the craziest stuff. He had all this experience. Either he had all this experience or he was a little bit full of it. But either one of those made him a great storyteller. Yeah. And so, you just like the guy. I left my shift one night, and I came back the next day, and you have roll call every day. Everybody meets in the muster room, and they read sort of like things that have happened throughout the night that we need to know, taking over the next day or whatever. And I could have been on night shift. I might have been coming at night. I don't remember. But on roll call, it was this guy's name is no longer employed with the Bradley County Sheriff's Office, and he is held in cell A blah blah blah. And he was in classification. He was in the place you put police officers when they go to jail. You have to keep them separate from everybody else. And I just remember, I'm 20, 21 at the time, and I was like, oh my God. Well, what had happened was, the horror story that they would often tell us about in ethics training, where a prisoner asked him for some sort of favor that was shady. It probably was, he could probably look at it and be like, oh, it's not the end of the world. It could have been as simple as bringing in a pack of cigarettes. You know what I mean? Something just a little bit shady, but not necessarily like you're going to go to prison for this kind of thing. But the warning and training was always, hey, if you do that, that prisoner now literally owns you. You know what I mean? Because the next thing they ask for, you either do it or I'm gonna show proof that you brought me these cigarettes, kind of thing. So they kind of had him up against a wall, and he just didn't have it in him to say like, hey, this is what I've done. I'm in a spot and I need help. He didn't have that. He didn't see that as an option, I don't guess. And it ends up, there's some money becomes involved and all kinds of stuff. And next thing you know, this guy is to turn in his badge, and he's put in handcuffs and walked down the hall and booked for a crime. So that was a wake up call. And it was a whisper to me of like, hey, there's broken people everywhere, man. And this guy could have been a teacher. He could have been, I saw recently in the news, there's a teacher arrested in a neighboring county, and they're tearing this school system up because allegedly they hire him knowing that he's under investigation for certain sexual crimes, and now he's indicted for those crimes. So it's not just police. So I'll preface that by saying it's not just police. I love the profession of policing just as much or more than I love the profession of I love them both. And I don't want to be part of shedding a bad light on either one of those professions. But I said all that to say there's corrupt people everywhere. So yes, those things that you're seeing in training day, there are some version of those things happening somewhere in the country and in the world all the time. Maybe not as dramatic and sexy as Hollywood would want to make it seem. But yeah, I mean, there's some shady things going on. Now,
pause, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So even still, when we talk about someone gets caught doing something, let's keep it in the jailhouse, like you said. Well, there was someone who caught him and then had the ethical decision of, so do I help my brother out, fellow officer? Do I try to handle this myself? Do I try to get him out? Or, do we lock him up? That's part of the process too, right?
Yeah. That's where it's tough. It's easy if this is a guy you don't know, you don't rely on him every day, maybe you don't even like him. That's a little easier. What's tough is when you're presented with like, hey, this is someone you work with every day. They've had your back. And this is sort of inching into like police subculture. There's a solidarity thing with police because of what they endure together and the bonds that are created because of those things. Okay.
Is that grounds for not doing shady activity, but is that grounds for, kind of leaning into those blurred lines and, maybe you do something here that you wouldn't do otherwise, or you wouldn't have done earlier in your career, or you wouldn't do for that person, but you will do for this person?
Yeah, when you bring in that idea that I'm talking about, that solidarity, the trust that is built, that's what blurs those lines. Again, it's easy when there's no lines there. If this was a neighboring police agency that just showed up to help you with something and you saw something shady going on, it'd be pretty matter of fact, like, hey, it's shady. Like, let's stamp that out. What creates the dilemma is when it's, you've been on shift with this guy for a couple years and you've never noticed anything wild, but then you start noticing some little and the scariest ones of all is where it's not inherently illegal, but it might be a little bit dishonest, a little bit shady. That's what could create a dilemma in the young police officer's mind. Your older guys, they're pretty much who they are, and their priorities are straight, and they're going to let their word stand, and that they're not going to hack, they're not going to put up with most things unless they've just been doing it for years. But
is dishonesty illegal? Because those two words, if they weren't in the same sentence, they were in back-to-back sentences, and it just caught my attention. Like, I can lie to you and not go to jail. Right?
That's right. Yeah.
But we're in this other context so is dishonesty illegal? I know we'd have to set context, but
it can be. It can be at times, yeah. Like providing a false report to a police officer, that could get you
illegal.
That could get you hinked up. If you're making statements that are...
No, you're talking about me as a citizen.
We're all citizens.
Keep going.
We're all citizens.
So a police officer,
even the police officers are citizens. Yes. Let's put me in a badge. If I go and make a report to a police officer that causes him to begin an investigation, and it is found that I was dishonest intentionally in order for whatever it may be. Maybe it's, I don't know, maybe I report something stolen that wasn't stolen. I've provided a false report. Or maybe I said somebody did something in order to, cause that person trouble, because now the police are going to begin an investigation and it's found that I did that knowingly and dishonestly. Yeah, that's providing a false report.
Do you get in a different type of trouble than I would if I...
No.
Same trouble?
Yeah, I mean, if I break the law, I break the law.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Another thing that came up somebody was saying something about, police cars with tinted windows. And I think you and I even talked one time about police officers using electronics while they drive. Sure. Some people, they believe that, the police are above the law, but it's not the law. That's not what I'm talking about, because there are certain laws that are different for police on duty. You understand? Like window tint, like a police vehicle that agency has deemed necessary to tint those windows, even blacked out, limousine tint. It's not the law that's illegal for that police agency to do that. You understand what I mean? Somebody besides the police has made an exception in that law to include police vehicles. So it's not the law. You know what I mean? If they changed it to where it was against the law, police agencies wouldn't limousine tint some of their undercover cars or whatever, which I think that's a whole other topic, but it kind of defeats the purpose now, because if I see a certain type of vehicle in a certain area and they have super dark black windows, that crowd, that community that they're policing, that sort of underworld, man, those guys know. There's certain neighborhoods, if you roll up in this neighborhood with that tint, you're the police. Period. Period. Anyway, that's a whole other topic. But
it is, but just for fun, if limo windows being tinted, why is that legal?
Why is it legal for police officers?
No. I just hopped in a limo. It's tinted. Why are you allowed to do that?
It's the back windows.
So you can't do that at the front.
That's right.
Can't do it at the first side ones.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's true for most vehicles. I would need to study up on that statute for sure, but it's the way I understand it.
When did that become a thing?
I don't know. I love that you always ask that question.
I love origin stories, man.
I know, man.
I do.
I know.
I do. Because, I remember, you mentioned Ready Player One. You're like, who's done something like that? And I had to say, some guy from Middletown, Ohio. But I remember being in Middletown, Ohio. I lived on this side of Middletown, Ohio, and my brother-in-law, Chris, lived on that side of Middletown, Ohio.
Yeah.
So, the bass bumping and the windows tinted meant something. And then all of a sudden, I remember, getting a little older, being in college, coming back, visiting, and now there's ordinances Like you can't be bumping that bass like that, or you're going to get yourself, pulled over. You're going to get yourself in trouble. You're going to get yourself ticketed or whatever.
Yeah.
And you can't tint those windows anymore. So, I mean, are we talking like late 90s, early 2000s, or, that's just me. That's just me being curious. But
yeah, it makes me
somewhere along
curious
the way.
as well. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I guess what I want to do here is try to make a bridge, because we could talk all day about the places where police officers bump into these issues and these problems. And it could be, and I'm sure a lot of them would be the same for any profession that we bring up, when it comes to just dishonesty in general. If I'm going to say things that aren't true intentionally, that's frowned upon pretty much anywhere you go. Okay. If I'm going to take money, that's frowned upon pretty much anywhere you go. For police officers, it is often an issue of what happens in real time on a scene being testified to in the way that it happened. One of the ugliest places I see for young police officers that are trying to figure it out. They'll be on an investigation of whatever sort, and they'll take certain actions in a certain order. And then fast forward a little while, and when they get on a stand in a preliminary hearing and they begin being cross-examined by a defense attorney, they realize they've made a mistake. And you can see it on their body language. They start reeling to try to fix it instead of just answering questions, Now, I've never seen, this person lied on the stand. I've never seen that be found out. If you watched enough, you'd find it. But man, I've been sitting in that room and I've read some of those people's body language, police and other witnesses, in the defense, on the defense side even, especially. But it's often inexperienced officers that get on a stand and they're nervous. They probably haven't done this a lot. And they start being asked questions, and you can just read all over their body language that they feel like they're in trouble and they're reeling for a way out. Now, that's a place, I don't have any specific examples of this person lied or this person, that's not what I'm getting at. What I'm saying is that's a place where ethics really shine when I'm sitting there as a people reader and I'm reading that body language, and everything about me, everything about you is telling me that what you're saying may be based in truth, but there's a lot of shadiness around it. Okay, and it happens all the time. What I'm asking you, where do teachers bump into this?
Like students reading the room?
No,
like what we project.
If I were teaching a class to teachers about ethics in the workplace, where would be the high points that I need to really bring up as examples?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's an excellent question. Because first I was we'll call this a surface layer, and then we'll continue to peel back. But I think I'm going to start with authenticity. Okay. So that, you're asking an ethical question that is going to get us into right and wrong, good and bad. Shoot, fireable, But authenticity allows us to enter into a learning environment and say the words, I don't know.
Yeah.
Because as a teacher, if you can say those words, it really does, it creates a whole lot more space for learning to happen. For curiosity to happen, for those really good questions that lead to the next really good answer, which leads to the next 3 really good questions. And that's how you travel, in the path to man, we're getting somewhere. We're getting this. So I think it starts with authenticity, because when you don't, I think it allows us to get into some spaces when a student will ask us a question. And we could be talking content, but we also, you're in those moments where kids ask us questions like they're asking for our opinion. They're asking for our perspective, our view of life. And sometimes you'll share something and then that, man, not in this room. That didn't fly in this room. That didn't hit in this room. How am I going to land this? I just went there right?
Yeah.
And then you begin to say things because your insecurities have popped up. And now that sense of what you just said about that young officer on the stand where like you feel like you're in trouble, but you're not.
Right.
But you're now responding like you're in trouble. And so everything about your face and everything about your body language goes to this other place. In teaching, you know, I feel like that's an inauthentic place to try to continue to communicate. And how often do we, let's just even slide out of the classroom just for a second in relationships and just pause and go. I mean, I know I learned how to do this later in my marriage. I'm just going, well, can I get a timeout? Because this
timeout.
I've gone down this path that like, this is not where I intended to go. These aren't the word that I'm saying these words, but it's not what I mean.
Yeah.
Can I try again?
Yeah.
You know, and earlier on in marriage, you know, it just, that doesn't fly real well because like all that does is bring up questions of like, so what have you been saying? What do you really mean? You know, it's like, okay. But if we trust each other enough, then you'll give me a do-over and I'll go, okay, let me try this one more time. And maybe we can get somewhere. So authenticity, I would put that up on the board. But ethically, I don't know, my mind goes to, and if you're wanting to go somewhere else or you're thinking somewhere else, just kind of stop me. But in the classroom, I think physical space is needed. Like, it's one thing to be a youth leader in a church. Mm-hmm. It's another thing to be a high school teacher. But what if you're both? You know, we were having a similar conversation in class because I'm taking a law and ethics class with Dr. Lawson on Wednesday nights. Last night was Wednesday night. Mm-hmm. You know, I'll hug a kid, young fella, young lady at Camp Cherokee.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But I'm not going to hug that young lady in class. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So is teaching what we do or is it who we are was a question that came up last night. Because, I mean, like I am who I am everywhere that I go. But I choose to do this here and I choose not to do that there because there's this other space, this other line, this other expectation, this other... like that could be taken the wrong way. This gets us a little closer to ethics, I think. Mm-hmm. How much of ethics is open to interpretation in the time that we live in? How do we keep ourselves out of a situation that is even questionable? Like I don't think I'm heading in the direction that you have intended to go. But you just put me in a context of, you know, as a teacher of teachers, you know, where would you begin this conversation? Because I mean, there is the obvious answer. Hey, don't lie to your students. Like that's ethical and that's obvious. Mm-hmm. But how do you navigate the waters of tension? Maybe this will go somewhere. And not lose yourself in that moment of now you're just giving your bias, maybe. Is that ethical for us to, there's the word indoctrinate of people accusing teachers of doing that, though these people that accuse such things aren't even in our classrooms. Now I'm speaking as a history teacher that teaches in Tennessee, and we've had some laws be passed with not some real specific language, but yet some expectations of what to do and what not to do. But yet when you begin to ask specific questions, there's not a lot of specific answers, but yet expectations still lie. Still, this isn't ethics. How about you save me from myself here?
I disagree with it. I think it's all ethics. I think you're still right.
Well, define ethics then. Define ethics.
Well, I think ethics is sort of, you know, at its basis definition, I would say it's like a moral compass, like your a certain set of principles or values that you individually entail. But if I'm going to take, you know, 150 teachers and put them in the same building, there's going to be some expectations I have for them professionally. And part of that is going to be sort of getting them all on the same page at certain points that they're going to encounter, and how they disseminate information and what information they disseminate to students is absolutely one of those.
Yeah. All right. Don't lie. Okay. So we've established that. Don't tell half truths.
And I think you even touched on, and I'll quote Nat Akiona, living above reproach when it comes to physical space with students. That's obvious. Don't mess with the dang kids.
Yeah.
And don't even let yourself act in a way to where it could be misconstrued that you did.
Sure.
That's ethical to me.
But how about that part that I brought up of like, okay, if you go to a private school, you're going to get a particular education. And as a parent, you know that you're sending your kid there and like, yeah, I'm sending my kid to Baylor or Macaulay, shoot TCPS. Like, I want devotions in my class.
Yeah, by choice. You're choosing to send that kid to that place, yeah.
I live in the Bible Belt, but I send my kid to a public high school. You can have parents with expectations of, and I would love it if there was a devotion given in my class for my kid. And then you've got another parent that would be like, not a chance in the world. I want my kid to be a part of something like that, a part of that, religion. Around here we say denomination. And now, like, we're in this place of healthy or unhealthy learning environment. And maybe we're not talking right or wrong or good or bad, but how can we keep the momentum going of building relationships while also presenting content to make kids think? More so learning concepts than content. Because if you can learn how to learn, then you can plug in any content, be in any classroom. And, I think school-wide, when you gave that example, like, what is the basic understanding of how we communicate and articulate well for kids to get what we're doing?
Yeah.
Because the rhythm of a math class is totally different than criminal justice and U.S. history. I get it.
Yeah.
But there's also that you bring yourself into the room. There's a vibe there, right? There's a safety there. There's physical safety, but there's also emotional safety. And how do you ethically behave? Ooh, okay. If I could land it somewhere and like get to where I think that your intent was, like, what is our ethical behavior as professional teachers to just treating students well? Shoot, even treating each other well.
And teacher, I was waiting for you to go there.
That's right.
That's a big deal.
It is a big deal. The hallway's a big deal. The plan center's a big deal.
The plan center.
Meetings are a big deal. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so that would have been my follow-up. I was waiting on you to go there, and you got there.
That was one of those, if we had a marriage do-over, I'd be like, hey, that last part is what I meant. Now, I'm sure there was something in there that still connected or was still, true or, needed to be in this conversation. But, yeah, you didn't ask me a straight-up yes or no question.
No, I didn't intend to. And you were, a very similar place to what I thought you would go, and I'm glad you did, because there is that, if we start thinking of, first of all, what does a teacher encounter on the day-to-day? And one of the first, most obvious questions is students. And that's the first place you went, and that's good. That's why we're there. But another place that they go is professionally interacting with other teachers. That often happens in plan centers or teachers' lounges, as they used to call them. Meetings. Those are all things. I remember when this comes from working in corrections more than patrol, because I worked in a direct supervision jail, and you go, there'd be 14 of you show up there to work a shift, and there were pods of prisoners, and one of you would go to each pod essentially, and that's your prisoners that you're supervising for the shift. And one thing we used to bump into all the time was, and a lot of it has to do with manipulation by prisoners and just a weakness or an unawareness amongst the officers to deal with it. But they would end up, you would have an officer say something to a prisoner about another corrections officer. Well, then what happens? The next corrections officer comes in, and that prisoner relays that information. Oh, yeah, so-and-so said that this guy did this or did. So we would have corrections officers talking about each other to prisoners. That's another thing that I've encountered at Walker Valley High School.
Would you term that unethical, since we use the word
Absolutely.
ethics? Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, there's lines. There's two ends to that spectrum. Because in a law enforcement world, if you go too far in that direction, like, hey, we're on the same team here, don't be talking about me to the prisoners. You quickly arrive at this it's us against them place, which is often what you'll find in plan centers or at teacher lunches. It's the nightmare of teachers coming in and all of them talking about that student, that little knucklehead that's giving them all problems. You know what I'm saying? That's that's uncomfortable for me, man, because I've been that kid. I was that kid at my middle school. Man, I just don't, if I were teaching a teacher training on ethics right now, that would be included. Hey, when you go to these plan centers, why don't y'all consider talking about the weather or your weekend plans or, you know what I'm saying? Why don't you just disconnect for a minute? Let's not make this a working lunch all the time, because there's probably people in that lunch that don't want to work right now. They just want to.
Okay, is there a third way? Because I don't want to talk about the weather.
Well, the weather was bad.
No, but you get what but
the old, how about them Braves?
Yeah, but see, that's the other option, and you don't build rapport with your fellow workers by talking about the weather.
Talk about education. Talk about what you're doing in class, but don't just beat the crap out of that kid that you share and they're giving you a hard.
Yeah.
Now, there's a difference. If you want to get together on your planning period one-on-one and say, hey, this is a strategy that I'm thinking about using to help this kid or help him in my classroom or make this a better learning environment, that's different. That's professional. You know what I'm saying?
I do.
It is not professional to sit over your, Salisbury steak and just talk about what a hellion that kid's been to you, and you've called his mama and can't get a call back. And, that's just, gosh, man. An old corrections officer told me one time, he said, I want to be able to walk in this jail with a blindfold on and tell the difference in the officers and the inmates just by hearing them talk. If I can't do that, you need to raise your professionalism. And that stuck with me as a kid.
Yeah. No, I get that.
I've used that with my son before, recently. He gets in this job that he's in now, and I'm like, hey, man, you just make sure that when someone comes up, they can, by sight and sound, they can tell who's the kids and who's the adult.
Mm-hmm. That's a big deal at the age that he's at, doing what he's doing, where he's doing it. Yeah. So as a young teacher, somewhere along the way, we were in some sort of training, and here's one, stuff sticks. Harvard Business School had brought something out or had published something, and just about, dynamic changes that had occurred in schools, and they were able to build on that momentum and bring about a true impact in their schools. And it came down, did you change the curriculum? Did you change class sizes? Did you get more funding? Is it leadership? And what they ended up publishing was teacher rapport.
Yeah.
That you can change a school's, you can change a school, period. Teacher rapport. Because if we're in it together, and it's not an us versus them, but it's us with them, and we can go eye to eye, and we have been heart to heart. So that's why, I asked for that third way within those places, because I don't want to yap about kids.
Yeah.
But I'll have that conversation with you in your classroom, and we'll try to, in some sort of way, reach the kid, reach the parent, talk to an administrator together, but we're just not going to just, loosely just throw things out there in public. Not cool.
No, And listen, I welcome that. I've had teachers come to me and say, hey, this person's, they're all I can handle right now, and they've mentioned your name, and I know you have a relationship with them. Is there some advice you could give me, some way you could sort of link shields with me? And that's, that's the word,
gift.
Man. That's awesome.
Okay. So the other option in those workrooms is if you just stay talking about, the latest show on Apple TV or, Netflix or the Oscars or like you can be entertained and you can take a breath. And, sometimes you need that. But like if we never get to a place where, we say something meaningful, share something meaningful. Like I love the way that you and Paula Stewart hang out every time that you see each other. It's because of the way you hung out when you saw each other before, when she was still here before she retired.
Yeah.
Because you were like, hey, this is where I'm from. This is where we're from.
She spoke my language, man.
She did. You say that all the time about her, and you remind her of that. And you tell other people that she speaks your language because you connected. There was a rapport there between you and her. Yeah. Now, classroom management, I bet you had different styles.
Oh, almost certainly.
Certainly.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter. Because if you had troubles with somebody, you could go to Paula and say, hey, help me out with this kid, vice versa. The more that we can build that network of support for each other, then we're going to be able to build a network of support for kids.
Yeah.
Because the kids are going to come and go. They come and go out of our class after 90 days, but then they come and go after 4 years.
Yeah.
But, for those of us that have committed to this, I mean, like we're in it for a decade, 2 decades, 3 decades to retirement. Which means we're going to share a lot of that time with a whole lot of those folks. There's a big old overlap. And so to be there for us and we're going to have to take some risk of what kind of conversations that we have that actually ends up being kind of meaningful. And I think some of that starts with, a parent gets sick, a parent passes away, and, you lean into each other and you check on each other and like, now it's becoming a little bit more personal. And now that it's a little bit more personal, now you're willing to share something a little bit more meaningful. And that's not for everybody. I get that. It's just not. But for those places that they just don't want their work environment to be this very static place, that it's more dynamic and that that purpose is an actual thing. You can't do this. You can't close your classroom door and just build your own kingdom and, not share the responsibility of the profession with one another, which means sharing of yourself. Is that unethical not to do that? No. Is it ethical to do that? Yeah.
Yeah, it's at least
redefine ethics for me. Yeah,
it's at least professional.
Yeah, but it's beyond the profession, though. My profession is I show up, I clock in, I clock out, I teach the content, I cover the standards, we test. I treat kids well, I don't disrespect them. But then there's everything else.
Yeah.
There's everything else. So, if I can quote the golden rule, great. But how many stories can I tell of how I have treated someone the way that I've wanted to be treated? In the student context, in the teacher context, in the parent context, in the administrative context, community context, and shoot, I'm not even going to leave myself out.
Yeah.
Have I treated myself well? Have I taken care of myself so I can take care of all these other people? I think that's going to have to be in this conversation if you're going to put us in a how do you treat other people? Well, also how well are you treating yourself, taking care of yourself? It's in the conversation of professionalism, but also like we're in this thing. We're not on an assembly line.
No,
we're doing something totally different.
Yeah, for sure. I'm going to pull us back in a direction. I ask you, I gave you an example of a question that you'll hear in conversations on police ethics earlier. I want to give you another one. And police officers and maybe other professions, I don't know, have heard some version of this question right here. This is a police officer specific question, but I want to sort of sift through it with you because it's an interesting.
Do I get to be a police officer in this example?
Yeah, for sure. Okay. All right, you're a police officer. You're working your shift. You've been working hard, man. You're doing your job. You're doing a great job. You stop by the local gas station because you need to use the restroom, and you're thinking, I'd like to have a cup of coffee. So you go in there, you use the restroom, you come out, there's a typical gas station, 3-4 people there. You wait your turn in line, and the owner of the gas station says, "Hey, thanks for your service. It's on me." You taking the coffee?
Am I a police officer?
You're in uniform on duty. You didn't ask for it.
Is this my regular stop? Is this in my community?
Yes.
Is this my guy?
Yeah, this is your guy.
Do I know him by name?
If you don't, you will.
Yeah,
because that's just the way it is. This is your place, man.
Yeah, but timing. Do I know him already? Is this Tim working behind the counter that I see him every morning as, I'd start my shift at 6 a.m.?
Does it matter?
I mean, maybe to me it does, as you're making me think about this, because we've had this. Okay, don't make me be a police officer just for a second.
Okay.
Let me just be me.
Yeah.
Guy who was raised to be good, take care of other people, be the guy behind the counter that offers people free coffee on me. I got it.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other side, you politely say, no, thank you. But later in life, I've learned that if you're going to be the guy on the other side of the counter that offers the stuff, be the guy on the other side of the counter that says, yeah, thanks, and lets that thing actually be a thing. Let that blessing actually be a blessing. Let that thing. So that's where I live my life now. Like, I say yes a bunch, even if I don't want a piece of banana bread.
Yeah.
I'm going to say, yeah, thanks, because that banana bread was offered to me. Now, if I have that rapport with that person and I don't like banana bread, I don't like banana bread, but you're thinking of me. Appreciate you, right? That's a different response.
Yeah.
But you've just put me in uniform in front of a couple other people
that also know him by name and stop here every morning on their way to the factory.
They know me or they know Tim behind the counter.
This is their spot too.
Yeah.
He's not offering this because you're his buddy. He's offering this because of what you're wearing on your chest.
I mean, you're not a guy who traps me, but I feel like this is some sort of like ethical dilemma.
Listen, you could answer this question, and in my opinion, it be completely wrong, and it's not wrong. This is a tough question.
Yeah.
There's layers to this question, and there's...
As a police... Okay, I'll just answer it. Police officer, no. I'm going to lay down my $1.04, and I'll say, see you in the morning.
Hey, man, no, your money's no good here.
I'm still going to lay down my $1.04 and say, see you in the morning. I don't know why. Like, I've never had the badge on, right?
Yeah.
But like I've already explained personally, yeah, thank you. Appreciate that. And go on my way. But I don't know, something about doing the right thing or doing things the right way.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's just, maybe I want to be that good guy. Maybe I want to be that good cop. Maybe I want to show that, like, I'm not going to take things for free. And what I really mean is maybe I'm not going to take things for granted. The service, I appreciate this service at this time in the morning. Mm-hmm. You're here with a smile on your face. I appreciate the offer. Yeah. But like, I'm in it with everybody else.
Yeah.
That's, yeah. I have to answer. I answered. Yeah, that's the answer I think I like.
So here's some layers, and you have the ability to think this through. But, the first one is the most obvious. There's eyes on you. There's eyes in the store, and as a good police officer, just as you are as a good teacher, you don't want to bring any chink to the armor. You don't want to shed any negative light on your department or your profession. So, you got the guy in the line behind you that's the factory worker, and maybe there's the thought in his head, look, this jackwad gets his coffee for free. I'm going down here to dig a ditch for 8 hours. I didn't get free coffee. You know what I'm saying?
So as the police officer, hey, throw it at this guy.
Yeah, for sure. You could do that.
Yeah.
You could do that if you want to. And then there's the idea of just what I brought up a minute ago. You're digging into, because this, by all means, this could be the most innocent interaction. But the fact still remains that there's people in here and you didn't offer any of them free coffee. So even as cool as you are and the great personality that you have, I have to believe there's at least a little part of you that you're giving me this free coffee in hopes that I come back tomorrow morning and get free coffee. And now there's always a police car outside your store because before long word gets around and police officers come here to get free coffee. And now there's no jackwads hanging around here and they're less likely to come in and steal your stuff. You know what I mean?
I do. So as a police officer, do you take the coffee?
Nah, well, I don't like it.
Yeah.
I've done it many times. I mean, this is daily. This is a daily encounter for police. This is real. They didn't make this up hypothetically. This is a legit thing. That's just another question that I like to sort of present to my kids. You know, I was working the gate the other night for a basketball game, and my kids, I had kids who needed service hours. They were working the gate, and I was just supervising because there's money involved. And this guy rolls up. He's not from our town. Did not have a badge that I recognized, and he had a neighboring county tag on his car, and I didn't know him.
So you're going to ask for free admittance?
He didn't ask anything.
Yeah.
He rolled up without stop and held a badge up to the window in plain clothes and said, PD, and kept going. And this is criminal justice kids that are serving with me. And I was like, guys, I want to chase that guy down and just have a conversation with him because, in my opinion, he just hurt, in your minds, my profession, and I don't like that. I don't know how he gets treated in his town or what he expects because of that badge, but I do not like it. That is a root of other things, and I do not like it. I don't like it at all. I don't appreciate it, and I would love to tell him about it, but I'm not going to because it's $3 at the end of the day. It's not a big deal, but...
Kids have any response to that in that moment?
Yeah, they thought he was a jackass. And that's the whole point.
Yeah.
Like, they don't know you. They don't know nothing about you.
Yeah.
And these are just these kids are 16 years old. They're not going to say, whoa, stop. I don't know who you are. You know what I mean? I just don't like it.
Yeah.
I'd give $1 million for that guy to trip on this podcast and me to tell him what a jackwad he was and how he sheds a negative light on a profession that I love, and I don't want him out here acting. You know, they say nobody, and I'm not calling this guy a bad cop. He may be great at what he does, but he just gave me a small bit of evidence that he's not. Nobody hates a bad cop worse than a good cop. You know what I mean? And I'm sure that's true for teachers as well.
Of course, it's for parenting too. It's for coaching as well. I mean, you're like, when you say solidarity, you know, when you've already mentioned, we're both husbands. So like there's already things that we can already connect through and with, you know, and as being a parent of boys, being a parent of, they're now men. I mean, like there's this, you're in this club, but it's not exclusive. You're always looking for the next person who can connect, can be a part. We're not trying to make an exclusive club. We're trying to find as many other people. As teachers, we're trying to find other good, strong teachers who love to learn, who love people, who love themselves, who love their community, and they want other people to be in this as well. I'm sure you feel the same way about cops, you know, who just love what they're doing. They love their community. You know, they love that fraternity of police, but they know that it's, as soon as, you kind of said this earlier, you know, as soon as we start creating any sort of us versus them in any context, you throw this to the church right now, you know, us versus them. I mean, that's an L. Yeah. It's already a little loss, and it has the potential of turning into a big loss, a failure. You know, so little wins are a big deal. The little win of pulling up, and you know, maybe you ask, maybe you show the badge, maybe you know. So, I hear you. Yeah,
and to sort of tie this back in, because this episode specifically is not a police podcast. That's not what I intended it to be, and it's not an education podcast. This is me and you, man, just two dudes figuring some stuff out. There's nothing we've said that doesn't apply to, you know, that 17-year-old dude that's just trying to figure out some stuff. There's nothing we've said that can't apply to his life right now. But there is ethically specific reasons for law enforcement, especially when we start looking at law enforcement as a whole. The whole idea here is that we present ourselves ethically and sound in order to gain and maintain public trust. Because without at least I'm not talking about the kind of trust where they say, oh, I want that guy to watch my kids. You know what I'm saying? I'm talking about the kind of trust where if something goes bad at my place, I at least trust the police enough to dial 911. You understand? Because in northern Bradley County, that's not that big of a deal. But you go down to certain neighborhoods just 30 miles west of here, 20 miles west of here in Chattanooga, there are neighborhoods that exist where crimes are happening, and there's not even enough trust in the police for those people to call upon them for help. You know what I mean?
I do.
And that's a fact I'll stand on.
Yeah.
So that's why it bugs the piss out of me for some guy to roll up to teenagers, flash his badge without even saying, hi, how are you, and just keep rolling. I don't like it. It's an insult to me. I didn't like it at all.
Well, there's teacher parallels there too, because you just don't want teachers to be boring.
Yeah.
You don't want teachers to not continue to improve their craft.
Yeah.
To develop themselves professionally and personally, to connect to not only their students but also their peers. You know, it doesn't help. It doesn't help that a kid can come to a class that they really enjoy and are engaged, love being there, and then the next class that's just counting every single second, to the next class that, yeah, I love this class. And then that fourth block is still like, I don't know what I'm going to get today. You know, that's a tough day. And it's already tough enough being a teenager. But like to have that inconsistency from the adults in the building, yeah, that's part of our profession as well, of showing up every single day, prepared, yes, prepared with the content, but prepared character-wise to be something that kids can lean into. No matter what the content is today, no matter what their mood is today, no matter what else is going on in the world, in their world, in the Walker Valley world, and those 85 minutes aren't wasted for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, man, I think I'm going to button this one up. You good?
Yeah, I'm good.
All right. Thank you all for listening. Hope you enjoyed our talk. I hope that you've heard some guys talking about some things that maybe something sticks with you, or maybe you think about it in your next encounter where ethics comes to mind. And I will say before we go, in the words of my granddad, you can have $1 million, but if nobody believes you what you say, you got nothing.
Amen and amen.
Man, that's downright mindful. You've been listening to Downright Mindful with your hosts, Matt Paris and Paul Salzville. Produced by Josh Morris. Intro and outro production by Derek Kinsey. You can find us wherever fine podcasts are downloaded. Thanks for listening.